It's important to me that you guys know that I am wearing an American Psycho t-shirt, although it's not like I can see the relatability between American Psycho and the entitlement of mediocre white men. Hey loves, my name is Amber, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be discussing Mediocre, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America by Ijeoma Oluo. I did briefly want to thank Seal Press for sending me this copy of the book as part of their Seal Press Ambassadors program. However, this video is not monetarily sponsored in any way. As a brief content warning, I did want to note that the book does chronicle racism, sexism, and just general discrimination, but in doing so, at times it does make use of racial slurs. It is very relevant to the text, and it is written by a Black woman, so there is a bit of authority in the use of them, but just so you are aware, if that is something that is going to be bothersome or upsetting to you, please have discretion while reading the book. And another diversity inclusion that I did want to note, because I was very excited about reading it, is that throughout the book women are mentioned, but in the whole relations between like women and men. So there are definitely several parts throughout the book where it's mentioned as women and non-male individuals. So I thought that that was a fantastic way of including those who fall all across the gender spectrum and who don't necessarily identify as cisgender males. So the book chronicles a brief look at the history of America, specifically the last 150 years of history, focusing on specific events that were designed to benefit white men and the adverse effects that these events and conditions had on minorities. A particular interest was focused on the Black communities and women, but Latina, Indigenous, Asian, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, and queer folks were also mentioned throughout the book as well. Throughout the chronicling of these different events, we do get an account of historical topics as well as personal anecdotes that are in relation to the particular events that are chronicled throughout the book. So we do get a bit of insight of Oluo's experience as a Black woman in America who writes about race and politics. And we do get a lot of insight into, you know, a minority's opinions on said events that are negatively affecting minorities, which I do feel like is probably one of the best perspectives that you can get while chronicling these kinds of events, because, you know, you don't want to read about the mediocrity of white men as written by a white man, you know? You definitely need that insight of different race and culture. Unlike many historical accounts or political books that we see in today's day and age, this book was actually written in a way that it's very easy to follow and read. And there's even an air of casualty to it, so it doesn't feel like you're being talked down on or talked at. It feels almost like a conversation with a friend, but like a friend who's not taking any shit and who's going to call you out on your own bullshit. And while there are definitely times where that kind of narrative voice makes it feel a little less than professional at certain points, at the end of the day, I think it ultimately makes the information a lot more accessible to a lot more people, because I don't know about y'all, but I have such a hard time reading historical accounts and things that have to do with politics. As much as I like to be as well-rounded and educated as possible, I feel like most of it is just so insufferable to read, and this was a really refreshing alternative to that, where I actually was able to completely understand everything that was going on at all times without having to like actively think critically about it. It was just very easy to follow, and it felt very casually presented, which, I mean, at times was almost a little bit uncomfortable, but not from the writing perspective, just like reading about such atrocities that have happened in our history with such a light, casual air and like tone of divinity. Because like obviously I'm aware that these things happened and that these are very regular events for most minorities, but I only have so much perspective as a femme person and as a member of the queer community. I definitely can objectively understand discrimination in different elements, but I have no idea what it is like to be racially discriminated against, and I will never truly understand. But it is so heartbreaking trying to understand from the minority's perspective, just and how normalized this is. Because, like, as a human being who cares about other human beings, everything that has been discriminatory that you hear about in the news and in history for the past entirety of our country, I can empathize and understand how awful these things are, but to hear about them chronicled by a person of color with such a casual tone and just a matter-of-fact aura, because it is unfortunately a fact of our day and age and our current America that these racially motivated events are going to occur. It's fucking disgusting and just so heartbreaking to read that from the perspective of the minority who's being discriminated against. Which, I mean, is definitely necessary, and I think that that's a really, really important and powerful note of the book. But I'll be honest, other than just that addition to the emotion behind it, I personally didn't necessarily learn too much more that I didn't already know. And you know what, I will actually take back what I said. There was definitely a lot that I didn't already know, so I did completely lie. Not intentionally. There is a lot of very specific, minute details that I didn't already know, but unfortunately it's all in the same vein of the same shit that has been going on for hundreds of years. So, like, it didn't necessarily feel new. It's just like, same story, different name, you know? In that same vein, I feel like the group of people who would get the most benefit out of reading this book would be white male Americans. However, the book is written a bit aggressively, and, like, absolutely justifiably so, understandably, and it even gives you a note of the emotion behind it. There's definitely a lot of, you know, emotion behind a lot of what is written, so there is a bit of an aggressive tone at times, which I enjoyed as somebody who agrees with pretty much all of the opinions that Oluo had stated throughout the book. I am right there. But I could see that as being something that would alienate white men, which unfortunately is the group that needs this book the most. Because, like, the average minority gets it, for the most part. I mean, there is definitely a lot of more minute intricacies between minorities against other minorities and that kind of thing. But for the most part, minorities are going to understand the core judgment of oppression and how politics and our society is built to benefit the average mediocre white man while pushing down the rest of us. So I feel like for the most part, most people are going to get it and already kind of relate to certain aspects. So I feel like who really, really needs to read it is the average white cisgender man. But unfortunately, I can't imagine very many of them doing so, because like we've seen with so many different social movements within the past few years, a lot of people aren't able to separate the criticisms of people in a general sense versus, like, taking it personally. So unfortunately, I could see the average male, if they did try to read the book, being a little bit more personally offended than realizing that this is an overarching problem that affects everybody in our society, and that it's not necessarily a personal attack on any one particular person. It's an attack on the society and the politics that are built around the benefit of only white male Americans, instead of finding a way to societally benefit every individual who is a part of the community. But overall, I do think that this is a very well-written book and a very important read that just about anybody can either relate to or gain insight and information from. It does a really, really good job at outlining the problematic and racist history of the United States, and gives us a little bit of insight onto what we can do to do better. And we need to do better.